I'll just give everyone a second to hop online so you can take this time to just get centered, slow your breathing. And please feel free to share or tag yourself in this live video. I wasn't able to tag everybody. Okay, let me do this. Okay. Alright, there we go. Om Tat Sat. Divine blessings to everyone joining tonight's satsang for Yoga Vasishtha. Pranams, Miraji. My prayers are with you. Om Tat Sat, Shobnaji. Divine blessings. Tonight's Yoga Vasishtha is, we are still in book 1, and I always show it so in case people don't have it, but you can buy the scripture from the yrf.org website, the Yoga Research Foundation. And we're on book 1, Vairagya Prakarana, and Vairagya is dispassion, and Prakarana means section, so it's the section of dispassion. Om Tat Sat Devendraji. And we are on section 31, so we're getting closer towards the end. And we'll open it up with our mantras. So everyone just take a moment, center yourselves, get focused, turn the phones off, slow down your thoughts. Brahmanandam Paramasukadam Kevalam Jnanamurtim Dvandvatitam Gagana Sadrisham Tattvamasya Dilaksham Ekam Nityam Vimalamachalam Sarvadi Sakshi Bhutam Bhavatitam Tragunarahitam Sadgurum Tam Namami. Adorations to the Divine Preceptor, who is the bliss of Brahman, the giver of supreme joy, the embodiment of pure consciousness, beyond the pairs of opposites, vast like the ether, infinite, eternal, beyond all modifications. To that divine Guru, I offer my adorations. Om Shri Gurave Namaha. Jai Ganesha, Jai Ganesha, Jai Ganesha, Pahimam, Shri Ganesha, Shri Ganesha, Shri Ganesha, Rakshamam, Jai Saraswati, Jai Saraswati, Jai Saraswati, Pahimam, Shri Saraswati, Shri Saraswati, Shri Saraswati, Rakshamam, Jai Shri Lakshmi, Jai Shri Lakshmi, Jai Shri Lakshmi, Pahimam, Jai Shri Lakshmi, Jai Shri Lakshmi, Jai Shri Lakshmi, Rakshamam, Jaya Guru, Shiva Guru, Hari Guru, Ram, Jagat Guru, Paramaguru, Sadguru, Sham, Adi Guru, Advait Guru, Ananda Guru, Om, Chidguru, Chidgana Guru, Chinmaya Guru, Om. Om Tat Sat, Om Tat Sat, Om Tat Sat, Om. Om Shanti, Om Shanti, Om Shanti, Om. Om Shanti. Divine blessings to everyone. Hariam Tat Sat Guru Ma. Divine blessings. And we will get started. So we had left off where Lord Rama was requesting from the sages and saints in the royal court for spiritual instructions, and he had realized the essencelessness of the worldly objects and the pain and the sorrow that all these things bring to the mind that we experience as humans. And so he was in this mode and this feeling of desperation, of not knowing what to do. So realizing the pain and transitory nature of worldly objects, but then how do you continue living on in the world without these things impacting you? And so tonight's section is a group of questions that Lord Rama is asking to the sages for the spiritual instructions on what to do. And I noted that we might finish Vairagya Prakarana because it's kind of short towards the end, so it just depends on time. I'm trying to stick to the time limit. So section 31, spiritual questions. O sage, the life in the world is like dewdrops hanging high from the restless leaves of a tree. The physical body is as fickle as the croaking of frogs during the rainy season. The relationships with friends and family members are like thorny bushes nourished by the rains of the world process. And so when we think of dewdrops that are hanging high on leaves and the leaves shake and the dewdrops, they just fall off. And so life in this world is like that. If you think of our life existence as that dewdrop, and at any moment it can just fall, it can end. And the physical body is being compared to the fickleness of the croaking of frogs during the rainy season. And many of us throughout the world during the rainy season, there is a lot of frogs or even other animals that are outside, and you can hear them croaking, and they're just like croak, 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 croak. And so it's just kind of scattered, it's everywhere, it's very fickle. And so our physical body is like that. And the physical body, things can happen to it, and we can go through these ups and downs of, for example, like good health or poor health, or we can feel more elevated or less elevated. And the physical body, it just goes through so much as being a human. And the relationships with our friends and family members, due to ignorance, we have attachments, and many people misunderstand detachment and dispassion towards these things. And it's not a topic of avoidance or hating or disliking. It's more of the mindset when it comes to these things. And so understanding your relationships that you have with your friends, the relationships can end for a variety of reasons. And so because of that, that means that it's transitory, it's not permanent. And same with the relationships that we have with family members. They are also transitory, and the connections that we have can end for a variety of reasons. And so when you think of thorny bushes, like a rose bush that has a bunch of thorns on it, when you nourish it with water, these thorns on the stalks, they get bigger and they get sharper because the plant is maturing. And so the analogy is applied to the relationships of friends and family members being like a thorny bush, but that rain is the world process. And so those are attachments that we have due to ignorance, and that is nourishing the plant, that's nourishing these thorns. And so the relationships are like, you think of them like prickly. Like if you prick your finger on a thorn, it hurts, and it hurts temporarily, it doesn't hurt forever. And that's kind of the same way the relationships of friends and families, and when they end for whatever reasons, it can hurt, and you can experience sorrow, sadness, but even those emotions that we go through and we experience, those are transitory also. Subtle desires blow as the eastern wind, causing the clouds of karmas to gather in the firmament of the heart. Desires and hopes flash like lightning and roar like thunder, only to be ushered into a dark frustration. As the clouds rain down in torrents, greed dances like a peacock, and the buds of evil bloom. And death, like a fiendish cat, waits to pounce upon human life as if it were a helpless rat. And this is a very, very detailed, kind of descriptive paragraph of, like, when you really think about this in your head and you think of, like, the really strong eastern winds that can blow through with a storm, and those are our subtle desires that we have, and these are things that we work on rooting out. And because of these subtle desires, this really strong wind, when it blows through these clouds of karmas that we've accumulated, they can start gathering. And so you can think of like a storm, the storm clouds just gathering, get bigger. And then you have lightning and thunder. And so the lightning and thunder are our desires and our hopes. And then from having all these desires and hopes, when these desires that we have are not fulfilled, if we're not getting what we're desiring, what we're wanting, when our expectations that we have on something is not met, we have that underlying frustration. And so that's where our desires and hopes, they flash like lightning and roar like thunder, only to be ushered into a dark frustration. And as the clouds rain down in torrents, greed dances like a peacock. And so you can think of what the mind is going through during this frustration, when desires or expectations are not being met. And deep down, seated inside of us, is greed. And that's one of the demoniac qualities that we work on. And it just dances around like a peacock. And you think of how peacocks dance, especially the male peacocks. And they're real showy with the colorful feathers. And they just like dance around. And you think of death as a cat, and the cat is just kind of like waiting in the background, and it sees us as a helpless rat, and it's just waiting to pounce at us because we're so distracted, we're so caught up in all this frustration, the desires, the hopes, the attachments, the lust, the greed, the ego, everything, that we don't see death hanging in the background. We don't see death waiting to just snatch And so I really like that part because it's really descriptive, and I like really descriptive things where you can think about it and picture it almost like a big scenery, like an event, like something happening. What should a person do to shelter himself from the torrential rain of the world process? Who must be invoked? From whom should one seek refuge? What course should one adopt so that this forest of life will not abound with inauspicious miseries? So Lord Rama is wanting to know how does one shelter himself? How does one protect himself from all these things, from all these desires, from all these hopes? Who do we as humans, who do we look to protect us, to guard us, to guide us, to walk us through what happens in the world process when everything just seems to be raining down on us? And I know that's definitely something that many people are feeling right now for a multitude of reasons. There's been so many different events and tragedies that are taking place in people's lives and in communities, and just the way the world is right now. And that world process, it is like a torrential downpour. It's like a huge storm, and that it can be so overwhelming. And when that happens, all the anxiety and the stress and the worries and fears of what ifs and what's going to happen. And so Lord Rama is saying, who do we look to? Who do we invoke? Who do we seek refuge from all of this? What course do we adopt so that we can continue living without basically being drowned and swallowed up by the world process? This world is filled with sorrows. There is no substance in this transient world process. How can ignorance be destroyed in order to find the substance behind the illusory names and forms of the world? And so the world is filled with sorrows because of the attachments that we have due to ignorance. And when we're attached to things and we lose things, or things leave our life for whatever reason, we can feel sorrow and we can feel pain because of these attachments. And so we go through these different emotions, and they can come and go. And within this world, because the world itself is transient and everything in it is also transient, there's no substance. So there's no substance as in like permanence to anything. So how can our ignorance be destroyed in order to find the substance that's actually behind all these names and forms? And so everything in the world, you, me, every other person, every other object, tree, animal, you name it, it is all a name and a form. There are elements behind all of these things. There are elements that make up these things, but then you have to take it even farther and farther. What is it that is behind these elements themselves? And even if you figure that out, well, what is behind that too? And that's where you can really go down the rabbit hole into physics and stuff. And in science, they've taken it all the way back to what they've named the God particle, and that's as far as they've gotten. And you can't really answer, well, where did the God particle come from? What is the substance behind that too? And so that's where there's so much that our human mind and the brain and processing and intellect and thinking, it's so limited. And there's so much that's beyond all of that. And then that's where they say the separation of science and religion or spirituality is because it goes beyond that. And so Lord Rama is wanting to know, how do we destroy our ignorance so that we are able to find this substance? How can the dreary forest of the world be converted into the heavenly gardens of spring by the advent of knowledge? So the dreary forest of the world is because of our ignorance, and everything is pain and sorrow. But then when the wisdom and the knowledge is gained, and from that you develop the intuitive vision into seeing what truly is behind all these names and forms, everything suddenly becomes more like a heavenly garden. It's not seen as a dreary forest. Like, the perspectives change. How can the full moon of contentment be made to rise in the firmament of the heart, thus bathing the world with the nectarine vision of the self? How should the mind be rendered pure, so that the moon of bliss may flood it with its nectarine light of wisdom? And so, walking on this spiritual path, there are a multitude of different practices, purification processes that you can do. And to render pure means it's more of not pure, like pure. I'm trying to find like an easy wording. Basically, like, I'll use myself as an example. I used to be very quick to anger, extremely stressed out. I was so negative. I had a lot of what we would call demoniac qualities. So hostility, greed, anger, things like that. And so those are things that you're purifying. Those are the things that you work on through being on the spiritual path, and through all the different practices of meditation, studying the scriptures under the guidance of a guru, your yoga asanas. There's different things you can do. It helps bring these out to your awareness, and you realize that you can change these things, and you can turn them into what is called divine qualities. And so that's where you can go from being a selfish person to a selfless person. You can be quick to anger, but then now you're slow to anger, and it could take a lot to really make you angry. And so they're kind of like opposites. And so when the mind becomes rendered pure, the moon of bliss is able to flood it with the light of wisdom. So when you get rid of all of these like anxieties, fears, doubts, negativities, like all the demoniac qualities, and you start developing the divine qualities, you're able to absorb this wisdom and this knowledge that you're picking up from satsanga, from other sages and saints and gurus and sadhakas and whoever else you're learning from. And so you start gaining more of that wisdom, and that wisdom is light. And so that's where the light within us, everything's kind of more purified, is more clean, is more clear in a way. And so that light can shine a bit brighter. Whose example should one emulate in life in order to be free from all worldly attachments and attain liberation? So Lord Rama is wanting to know, who is it that we can look towards? Who is it that we can emulate and learn from and be guided from in life in order to be free from the worldly attachments that we have? Because if we still have all these attachments at the time of death, then there's not liberation being attained. And so attaining liberation is being free from the worldly attachments. And so instead of the worldly objects basically controlling you, yourself, your higher self is now more in control. And so instead of the lower self in control, it's the higher self that's more in control. What should a person do in order to render himself immune to the evil influences of afflictions and the illusory enjoyments of the world? And so he's wanting to know, what can we do, like, while we're alive and living in the world? How can we make it to where these influences and this pain and this sorrow, how can we make it to where it doesn't impact us? How can it not affect us? How can we live amongst these things and not be like consumed by it, or not be involved in it, or going down the rabbit hole with it? How can a person stay unaffected by the fires of the world process? Just as a fish cannot live without water, so no one can exist without being involved in the activities of the world. How can a person perform his day-to-day duties without being caught in the net of attachment and hatred? So this is a very, very applicable little paragraph, because we are like fish out of water until you find whatever spiritual path or religious path that resonates with you, that you walk on. So you feel kind of like a fish out of water until you find what works for you personally. And so we're like a fish out of water, but we need to learn how to exist in the world without being involved in the activities of the world, but at the same time being practical. And this is where Guruji always had such, he had so much wisdom when it came to the practicality of applying the scriptures. And that's something that is really important when studying with a guru, is the guru able to relate these scriptures to whatever that time era is. Like right now it's like more modern, so we're taking very ancient old scriptures and teachings and learning how to apply them to now. And so Lord Rama is asking, how can a person perform his day-to-day duties without being caught in the net of attachment and hatred? And so a modern example could be someone going to work, and maybe their boss is in a bad mood that day and is just kind of taking their frustration and anger out on the employees. How do you not develop hatred towards your boss for treating you that way? Or if you get caught up in traffic because of a train or an accident and it makes you late to like a doctor's appointment or something, how do you not get frustrated by these things that are happening? And so that's the net of attachment and hatred, and you can kind of call it like the net of the worldly process, because on this path, renunciation is a very, very important part of this spiritual path, but it's not unless you're a sannyasi. So renunciation is it's an interesting topic, because as humans, we have to go to work, we pay bills, we have to buy food from the grocery store. Many people are raising families, you have to go to the doctor. There's all these duties that we have, and you can't just give that up. Like, you can't just give that up and run away and not do what you're supposed to do. And so we're learning how to carry on with our day-to-day duties, but then not get caught up in all these things, not get caught up in gossiping or greed or getting attached to shopping or hoarding money or whatever. And so it's learning how to move in the world day to day. The mind continues to maintain its existence by contacting the objects of the world. When it becomes detached from the objects of the senses, it becomes non-existent. It merges in the self. And so your mind, when you think of how the mind works, and you think of our senses and the five senses, our senses are designed to go outwards, like they're focused outwards, they're not focused inwards. And so the more we're in contact and we're interacting with all these different objects, the mind is just going to keep on going, keep on going, keep on going. And so when you detach from the objects of the senses and you withdraw the senses and you don't have all these little distractions, and that's what meditation is, it becomes non-existent and the mind merges in the self. And so when the mind during meditation is not distracted by your thought waves, the different thoughts that go through your head, they're not distracted by sounds or smells or leftover food taste in the mouth or the clothing or how you're sitting. When it's totally shut down from the senses, that's when you can go more deeper inwards. That's when you go more into the self and it merges in the self. And that's where a lot of these experiences and this wisdom, it comes forth from within, and everybody has this. It's just learning how to tap into it. It is by acquiring that wisdom, which negates all the objects of the world, that a person can become free from the mind. Please continue to instruct me until the world-effacing wisdom has dawned in my consciousness. So by acquiring the wisdom that negates all the objects of the world, you become free from the mind. And so through all these practices and over time, and this is the section of dispassion, Vairagya, and so developing that dispassion towards the worldly objects, which basically means you're not desiring them, you're not wanting them, you're not craving them, you're not hoarding a bunch of stuff just to have a bunch of stuff. And so when you have the wisdom to see and differentiate the objects of the world and how transient they are and what the objects truly are, it no longer has that grasp on the mind. And so the mind is no longer like a slave to the senses, and it becomes free. So Lord Rama is asking for instructions on how to do this. Please instruct me so that even though performing actions in the world, I will be free from all miseries of life. And so he's bringing up that point of still living in the world and performing actions, but you're not attached. You're detached from the fruit of actions, the reward, the outcome. And so the ego is effaced at that point, because you're not focused on, well, I'm going to do this because I'm going to gain X, Y, Z. I'm going to do this because I'm going to get recognition. I'm going to do this because I want a bunch of money. Like, things like that. And so you perform actions because you're performing actions as a sacrifice to God. You're performing actions in service of God. You are seeing that essence of spirit of God in all things. And so you're able to perform your actions free and detached. And so, because of that, you're free from the miseries of life, because the misery of life is due to the attachments that we have, which is due to our ignorance. Please tell me the stories of great men, highlighting the manner in which they freed themselves from the illusions of the world. If I do not learn the method of overcoming the miseries of life, I would rather fast unto death than live such a dreary existence. So Lord Rama's he's really feeling the desperation and the wanting to know what to do. He's right at the pinnacle of, I don't want to be involved in this. I want the freedom of the mind. I want to know what this path is. How do I walk it? How do I do this? How do I perform actions in day-to-day existence? If I do not find the right approach and the solutions of life's basic problems, I will not take food or water. I will not perform the functions of day-to-day life, such as clothing, bathing, giving gifts, and attending to the various needs of human existence. I will stay silent like a painted picture. And this part reminds me of in the Bhagavad Gita, where Lord Krishna is instructing Arjuna, and he's in a kind of a similar predicament where he just wants to sit down and give up. He wants to say, what's the point? Like, why are we doing this? There's nothing good that's gonna come out of any of this. And so it reminds me of that, because Lord Rama is just like, oh, if I can't find the right way of doing things, if I can't figure this out, then I'm just not gonna do anything. I'm just gonna sit here and be still and be silent, and that's that. I shall abandon this body. This body is not mine. It does not belong to me. Which these are really important words. I am not even related to this body, which is the basis of manifold illusions. I am not associated with anything in the world. I will enter into absolute silence of the spirit by extinguishing the flame of desire. And so he knows that the body is not the true self. There is no self-identification with the physical body at this point. He is not associating the essence of self with the physical body. The physical body is not defining who Lord Rama is. He understands that this physical body is the basis of many illusions. And so that's like, you can think of our own human body and how we've put on basically this like costume of illusions on ourselves in name, fame, titles, everything. And then we live our lives defining ourselves by that, when in true essence, that's not who we are, and we are so much more than that. Thus, having spoken with a voice like that of a peacock before the clouds of wisdom, represented by the presence of sage Vasishtha, Sri Rama became silent, with wistful eyes, eager to listen to the nectarine teachings of his guru. And so at that point, he's just like, like he kind of had his big venting session, and now he's just sitting there with tears in his eyes. What do I do? Help me. I don't know. And so he is ready to listen and to learn and to apply. And we still got 20 minutes, about 20 minutes. So we're doing good with timing. So we will actually move on to the next sections, because it's only one page. And it's a good follow-up to this part. So section 32 is Sri Rama is praised by the Siddhas. After expounding the transitoriness of the world and the vanity of the objects, Sri Rama resumed his silence. His words, filled with the fire of spiritual aspiration, sent a thrill through everyone who was present at the royal court of King Dasharatha. And so they're all sitting there like, whoa, because we have to remember Lord Rama was young. He was very, very young at this point. And the wisdom that he had gained and his understanding of everything, it was impressive. It was extremely impressive. Apart from the general subjects, there were among the listeners great personalities such as Sage Vasishtha, Sage Vishwamitra, Narada, Vyasa, many celestial beings, and the counselors and ministers of King Dasharatha. And so there were a lot of these higher up kind of people, that people in the community and throughout the area, they looked up to these people. They were the great personalities of the time in the area. The Siddhas were heard saying, "From the beginning of creation, we have been roaming throughout this vast universe, but it is today that our ears have been fulfilled by listening to the nectarine words of Sri Rama. His wisdom and Vairagya, dispassion, have shown clearly that abiding happiness cannot be found, even in the heavenly regions." And so they're impressed, and they themselves are about to learn a lot too. Because they've been all over the universe, and then they've just sat and listened to Lord Rama go through all of his own emotions and muckiness and everything, and that desperation, that dispassion. And he understands that even happiness cannot be found even in the heavenly regions. And that's a topic. So a lot of people will perform rituals, mantras, prayers, etc. For gaining the heavenly realm. And so that's fine. That's wonderful. No judgment. But the heavenly realm is still temporary. It is transient, because once you have run out of those accumulated karmas, which have gotten you to the heavenly regions, you are going to come back. So you're going to come back to earth, because the soul is still not liberated. The soul's not liberated when it's in the heavenly region. Excuse me. Section 33. Sri Rama is praised by the sages. The sages who listened to the profound words of Sri Rama expressed their views in humility. It is a great wonder that Sri Ramachandra has uttered such words of profound wisdom. His expressions are devoid of the fickle sentimentality of the mind. His wisdom pertaining to the essencelessness of the world has destroyed all cravings and has given supreme contentment. And so even the great sages are impressed, and they're seeing firsthand right in front of them that Lord Rama, the wisdom that he has gained and the understanding that he has, is he's qualified. O Prince Rama, you have developed a subtle intellect which, like a luscious tree, is adorned with the flowers and leaves of reflection and rationality, and is laden with the fruits of Viveka, discriminative understanding, and Vairagya, dispassion. And so they're saying to him that they see that he has that subtle intellect where he is able to reflect, and he has that rational thinking, that intuitive understanding, the intuitive wisdom, and he's developed that Viveka, the discriminative thinking where you can, like self from not self, and true from not true, real from not real. And the Vairagya is the dispassion. And so there's no cravings for the worldly objects or for worldly living, and things like that. And so that's kind of where, like, the renunciation of the mind is you're renouncing these things. And so you don't have the craving for them anymore. You might be around them in certain situations where you might have to be, but you're not really, like, involved. You're not attached to what's going on. You don't really, like, in a way, you don't really care about it. But not, like, in a rude way of not caring. Just to be clear. He alone is called a man who has the light of spiritual aspiration burning in his heart. Others are not fit to be called a man. They are nothing but animals revolving in the wheel of birth and death, driven by their attachment, infatuation, and ignorance. And so this section is not meant to be an insult by any means when it's using the term being called a man, and being called animals, but it means so like a man of wisdom has the light of spiritual aspiration, but humans that are still under the sway of Maya and they have that ignorance still, it's more of animalistic characteristics. And so you think of animals and they're driven by attachment, infatuation, etc., etc. And so because of those characteristics and those demoniac qualities, animalistic qualities, the soul will keep revolving in that wheel of birth and death. It'll just keep coming back, keep coming back, keep coming back until it is liberated. Until the ignorance is dispelled, and then there's no more wheel of samsara. It is rare to find the clarity of vision which Sri Rama possesses. Rare are the aspirants who seek the self as the only goal of their existence. And so for when you think of, like, everything from this section that Sri Rama has been talking about, and the questions that he asked, and these qualities that he possesses, that's extremely rare to find in this world. It's extremely rare to find in modern living, where, because we're in the Kali Yuga, there's a lot of attachment, there's a lot of anger, there's a lot of greed, resentment, passion, desires, all those things. And so amongst all of that, it's really rare to find people who they're aspirants. They're seeking the self. They're seeking the source of who they are and where they came from and what the purpose of life is. And so, like, the aspirants like you and me and the people that might watch this video later, or others that watch other satsanga videos, and you're committed to this, those are all rare souls, because it's not every day that you come across people who are more interested in this rather than going to the movies or gossiping about other people or going out drinking and doing drugs or whatever. And so those are the rare souls. Just as moonlight emanates from the moon and fragrance from a flower, so this glorious wisdom has proceeded from Sri Rama. They are blessed who endeavor to realize the essential self through their existence in this world of illusory objects and perishable pleasures. Let us, therefore, enlighten Rama regarding the nature of the self. Sri Rama is the fittest recipient of wisdom. Let him attain spiritual realization of the self. Thus concludes Vairagya Prakarana, the chapter dealing with dispassion in Yoga Vasishtha. And so that is the end of Vairagya Prakarana, which we have been working on for the past multiple weeks. So I really appreciate everyone's support and encouragement with this. It is a very beautiful, beautiful scripture. It's a very long scripture. But there's so much that we can learn from it. And there's so much that we can take and apply to our daily living and lessons. And like, it's full of just gemstones. It truly is. And so I'm very grateful to Guru Ma's support, Guruji's support before he left physical embodiment, and the conversations that we had. And I thank God and Guru every day for the energy to keep doing this, even with my own health, physical body health things going on. The energy comes from them. It's not me. I'm just the messenger. Just the messenger. So yeah, I hope everyone is enjoying this, and thank you for attending. And it will be exciting next week to start a new section. And see who we had this evening. Pranams, Miraji. Thank you for all your support, and my prayers are with you, and for your dear ones, and Steve's loved ones, and his soul. Shobna ji, Dhanyavad, Devendra ji, Hari Om Tat Sat, Guru Ma, Om Tat Sat, divine love, light, and blessings. And thank you for everything that you do for all of us. You do so much. And yes, Miraji, the language is so evocative. Yes, it is. I enjoy it very much, reading it and just reading it over and over and over. Yeah, that's what got me down this path in 2020. I couldn't get enough of reading and hearing and listening. It was like, it's just like music to your ears. It's like poetry. And then the more you read it and the more you hear it, and you just learn and learn and learn so much. Like I keep notebooks. I have like over a dozen notebooks of every day for the past several years, just notes. And you can read the same thing, and it's so true what Guruji and Guru Ma has always said. Like, you could read the same thing multiple times, but each time you're going to learn something new from it. You're going to take something different from it, and that is extremely true. Thank you, Miraji. Yes, he's showering all of us with blessings. All of us. Thank you, Guru Ma. Yes, this body will do what it wants. I'm just going with the flow. It is a boat. Well, everybody have a good evening. Be healthy, drink water, take time for yourself, read the scriptures, help the community. Divine blessings. Om Tat Sat.